Hi, everybody. I am Luis Reyes, one of the partners here at Butcherbird Studios, and welcome to Butcherbird Presents. I'm excited today because our guest is my very dear friend, Felipe Smith.
What's up, guys?
Felipe and I first met because I edited his book, MBQ. First book that you did, right?
Yes, first published work ever.
And this was with you straight out of the school at the Art Institute of Chicago, right?
Many years later, though, I was already 25 years of
nice.
age. I was ready to kill somebody to get published.
And you did.
Yeah.
We published you.
I didn't kill anybody.
This show is about people working in the digital space, creators and producers and writers and people who use the digital space. You are an artist. You draw pen to paper, man. It's like you do very original stuff. But you've been using the digital space to advance your work, and also you're looking at actually creating work in the digital space later on.
That's
right?
correct.
So I want to, now that is settled and you know where we're going, audience, I want to talk about why people might know you. People might know you for two things. One is you were a character designer for the last run of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles TV show,
yeah,
for 5 years, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about that experience, just like, give us a sense of what it was like.
It was cool. It was my first time working at first time working on TV, just period, and animation, televised animation. Also, first time working with a crew of over 106 artists.
Which is odd because you're definitely a lone soldier when it comes to art.
Yeah, when you're a comic book artist, you don't usually have a chance to work with a lot of people. You just do the stuff yourself. You draw the pages. It's pretty lonely, creative experience in a way. It's one of the benefits as well. Working at the studio, all of a sudden, I was surrounded by people, and they're doing their own thing, listening to music, doing jumping jacks and stuff. Ninja Turtles crew, so like, of course, it wasn't my room. I was used to having a room, and those four walls were my domain, so I could have it as quiet or as loud as I wanted. When you work in the studio, everybody's got their own style. You're working in a team, on a team,
right.
In a group. So like, yeah, took some getting used to.
Right, and that series was critically lauded, and people did especially note the character designs in that. I think that people really were drawn to those, right?
Yeah, the showrunner, Ciro Nieli, is really good. He's a visionary.
And he knew your work beforehand, right?
Yeah, actually, it took me leaving my own country to get recognized in my own country.
Which we will get to, actually, as part of it.
So luckily, yeah, he'd seen my work, and when I met him, we just kind of, it was pretty cool.
You said when you went into the interview, he had the Pikachu books like sitting there.
Yeah, I pretended I didn't see him. But yeah, that made me really happy, and I kind of felt a little bit more at ease because when you go in for an interview, you're like, oh man, am I gonna get this?
Right.
And at the time, I desperately needed employment.
Right.
It's a theme throughout my life. I guess artists go through this. It's feast or famine. But yeah, I really needed work, but at the same time, I wanted to do my own thing, so it was kind of...
All right.
But it was cool. I saw that book, and it was a little bit of I felt like it might be a sign of some positive things happening, and yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to come back to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles a little later. I also wanted to talk about the people might know you because in the middle of that run, that TV show, Mark Paniccia over at Marvel, who we both worked with at Tokyo Pop,
That's correct.
Approached you, not about drawing a book, but about writing a book and reviving Ghost Rider.
That's correct.
And tell us a little bit about that.
And I'm wearing a t-shirt right now. Boom, Robbie Reyes, Ghost Rider. That's my boy. Yeah, it was cool. It took a while for me to get work. And then when I started on Turtles, I thought, okay, cool. I have a job now, and I can relax and have a life on weekends and whatever. And then, no, you're wrong. Mark hit me up, and he said, hey, I got a project for you. Would you be interested in creating a new Ghost Rider for a younger audience? And he drives a car instead of a motorcycle, and like I couldn't say no. So I went from having one full-time job and the possibility of a normal life to just having two full-time jobs, one in animation, one in comic books, which I just dove into right away.
And the whole thing is that he came to you actually asking you to write a story, not draw it.
Yes.
And then it did, but later on you were able to draw for the book, right?
Yeah, it was actually the first time I ever worked writing for another artist, because I've always written and drawn my own stuff with my first series, MBQ, with you, and then after that, going to Japan and working on People Choose. So Ghost Rider was the first time I was just writing, and that's it. And so you know, it was a learning experience, and I quickly realized that, you know, it is a team effort, and you have to write to the strengths of the artist you're working with. So the way you visualize things, you have to be very specific about it and articulate through your scripts,
Right.
or else you're going to get something back that's not what was on your mind, and that's 100% your fault as a writer. So
Just because, like, when you write, when you draw your own books, you're writing to your strengths
exactly,
too, right?
So you don't even have to be so specific about shots or whatever, because you know, you have a mental library of how you want to handle things. But now this person you're working with doesn't have that library. And the other thing you have to take into consideration is that maybe they have a different library, might be better than your library, or it could work, you know, better for different scenes. So like, it's up to you to look at their work, be informed on what things they, you know, they truly excel at, you know, what other things that maybe you would do as an artist are probably not their thing, and just really lean into like their strengths. And so yeah, it was definitely very good. I learned a lot from the artists I worked with, and I think I became a better writer for it as well, because there was just, once that script is out, you know, you don't want to be bugging people, calling them on the phone and being like, oh, do this, do that. And you don't want to be asking for all sorts of changes, because that's horrible. So
Right.
yeah, it was a good experience, definitely.
That's great. And then again, another reason why people might know your work is because your character, Robbie Reyes, which Mark Benicia called me and said, hey,
Based on you, and this guy,
hey,
Louis Reyes.
you're gonna like that.
Yeah.
So yes, when you see Robbie Reyes, the Reyes in his name is actually named after me.
Correct.
But you had mentioned, so that character ended up being on the TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
That's correct, yeah.
And that was amazing. You hadn't told me this yet, and I actually saw it.
Oh, yeah.
I saw an advertisement for it. I'm like, oh my God.
right.
And
Yeah.
then we talked about it.
Well, because a lot of people, you know, they thought, okay, Ghost Rider's going to be on TV, and you know, they just didn't expect it would be the newest.
Your
iteration
Ghost
of mine.
Rider,
So like,
right.
yeah, a lot of people flipped out. Nobody flipped out more than I did. And then when I saw the promotional image, which was basically, it mimicked the image on my shirt, which I drew. It was my first variant cover for issue 1 of All New Ghost Rider. The ABC promotional image was the live action version of this, with just the car flipped the opposite direction. I saw that, I was like, wow. Because usually you don't
So
expect...
they shot your image.
Yeah. Like, and usually you don't expect things to translate very well, or at least I don't. Maybe I'm, you know. But and then once I saw, you know, Gabriel Luna plays Robbie Reyes, and I mean, he does a great job. He read the hell out of the comic books. He looks like my drawings of Robbie Reyes, which is pretty crazy when you meet somebody
Right.
who looks like a fictional, you know, image that you came up
Sure.
with. So, you know, every once in a while I'll see him, we'll talk and we'll hang out and stuff. And I think he's getting tired of me telling him that. But, you know, I'll just talk to him. I'm looking at him. I'm like, man, you just look like my drawing.
Yeah, that's good. You conjured him out of thin
Yeah.
air, right? Well, let's actually take a real quick look of you talking about the TV show.
I was approached by editor Mark Benicia of Marvel Publishing, and he said that he had an interesting project for me that he thought I'd do a good job on. I was like, okay. And he said it would be Ghost Rider, but it would be a new Ghost Rider that I was free to create. And he only had 2 stipulations: that he'd be younger than the commonly known Ghost Riders, Danny Ketch and Johnny Blaze, and that instead of a motorcycle, he'd drive a car. And he absolutely sold me on the car.
That's amazing, right?
Yeah. Also, just want to do a quick shout out to Trad Moore, the artist of the first story arc, Damian Scott,
Right.
the artist of the second story arc, Chris Anka, who helped me finish up issue 12. I got to draw issue 11 and 12 of the original run. And then Juan Guillon for Ghost Racers. Val Staples, Tamara Bonvillain, our colorists for the series. And of course, Mark Benicia, my editor. Thanks, guys.
All right.
yeah.
So that was great. I mean, so we've talked a little bit about kind of why people would know you. Now let's go back to the beginning. Let's go and just kind of look at what you've been doing, because I want to get to the point at which the idea of digital media kind of, you know, collided with this idea of a more traditional drawn art form, right? So first of all, you're from Argentina. You speak Spanish.
That's correct. I was born in Akron, Ohio, but I was raised in Argentina. I moved there when I was 5.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You're born in
Mom's
Akron, Ohio.
Argentine.
That's right. Yeah.
My dad's Jamaican.
And then you moved back to the States for college.
For college, yeah.
And you went to the School at the Art Institute of Chicago.
That's correct.
So talk about that experience a little bit, because it was more of a fine art training you had there, right?
So the Art Institute of Chicago is a museum in the Loop of Chicago on Michigan Avenue. It's got originals by Picasso, Manet, Monet, Renoir, Degas, a whole bunch of, you know, fine art. I was not very informed on fine art, my whole thing was like, covers for comic books and, metal band.
But they let you in.
They did. Yeah, you have to submit a portfolio, and I submitted. I was into painting and drawing and stuff, in high school. And I submitted a portfolio, let me in. And then I quickly, found out that there's all sorts of art that are not just, drawn or painted depictions of things, but there was time arts, there was 4D, installations, and all sorts of, stuff that I considered very strange, but that also I considered very edifying. I learned a lot from it. But the one thing I did realize right away is that most of the teachers at my fine art school thought that comic books were absolute garbage and not art. So, we weren't allowed to draw in that style or whatever. So I had to learn, other things, which I'm glad I did. And then conceptual art was the biggest thing, where a lot of people are like, well, that's nonsense. That's just a bunch of, garbage. You need skills to be an artist, and like just thinking up, themes and then doing like a splatter of paint with like little, pieces of cardboard on it is not art, or like a gold-plated toilet or whatever. But actually, that's one of the biggest, most important things I learned at the Art Institute was the concept of what you're doing. When you're telling a story, you want to basically impart some kind of message or feeling or idea to an audience, and you're no longer there after the work is created. It has to speak for itself. So the concept of what you're doing is actually very important when you're making animation or comic books or anything, street art. It's what does this message mean? Why are you creating this? Is it just a cool thing? It just looks cool and that's it?
Right.
Or is there actually something behind
Right,
it?
right. It's not, I drew a car and that looks like a car and that's the end of it.
Exactly.
Right. There's conceptually a larger meaning behind this collection of images you're bringing together,
Definitely.
right? And also you're talking about kind of like, putting drops of paint on cardboard and calling it art too. I mean, there's a lot to say about sort of what abstraction means.
Right.
I've seen some of the more interesting comic book artists that I've read and looked at, and even some things you've done in your books where you use something with negative space and something extremely abstract to kind of convey a message.
Right.
And it's really chilling sometimes. It's really impacting, right? I mean, like, in terms of your training that you had there, what was the biggest thing you took away from that?
The one thing I learned is that anything and everything is art. And in the right context, it has meaning. And I learned this from
that context is art.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
good. Yeah.
And I learned this in our critiques. You have critiques, you put your work up, and then you back it up, or what's the reason why you did it, and why it looks the way it does. And at the end of the day, I mean, the simplest thing, the thing that you would consider takes the least amount of skill to make, can actually be something very like profound and interesting. So I try to carry that over into comics. Obviously, as a medium, comic books have to be easy to read. You don't want people scratching their head trying to figure out what's going on the page. You're going to lose them as an audience. Comic books have to be, have to tell a story in a very simple, easy to understand, easy to digest manner. But as you said, sometimes, going a little more abstract or like, doing things with negative space or compositionally changing things will enhance what it is that you're trying to tell. So I always try to tap into different things.
Right, yeah.
When doing comic books.
Because you kind of, you think, I mean, if everything was just a clean image, how interesting would that be?
Exactly.
So after school, I know you worked briefly at an educational animation thing. We don't really have to go into too much of that because you...
JRL Enterprises, what's up, Chicago? Love you guys, thank you.
But then you landed in LA, and you landed in LA, why? Why'd you come out to LA?
Because I wanted to work in animation.
Right,
And I was like, yo, I got this, like I'm gonna be huge.
And what happened?
Nothing, like nobody wanted to hire me. I ended up working very quickly in the food service industry at a Chinese restaurant in Westwood. Then I took my second part-time job at a postal center in Palms, packing boxes and mailing stuff, doing money orders and whatever. And like I quickly realized that it was the first 8 months of my life where I wasn't drawing because I just didn't have time to. I worked at the Chinese restaurant, and then I would get back home and then go to the other job and do that. And then I'd get home at like around 9 or 10, exhausted. And I was freaking out. And I was like, I knew immediately that I wanted to draw for a living. I wanted to tell stories. The good thing about that experience was all sorts of crazy people go to restaurants and eat, and they go to postal centers to like mail stuff out. So I really like incorporated a library of characters from these 8 months or a year of just not doing art. I was just filming everything, and like MBQ, the series I did with you, was kind of just me getting all those characters out and putting them, kind of representing LA,
Right.
you know, through characters and also visually through like the landscape of the city, which is the way the city looks is also a character, you know, in its own right. So
And there are two things that I think is really interesting about your work, and we'll get to this. I feel like I'm jumping ahead, but I mean, your characters are exaggerated in appearance, but extremely truthful. Like they're really true to their character. They're really true to their moment. They have a very human vulnerability underneath this exaggerated feature.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think comic books as a medium, anything you draw is a possibility. You know, you have the highest budget technically in the world over movies or video games because as long as you can draw it and think it, it's there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a waste to not exaggerate certain things visually to bring the point across. You know, graphically. But at the same time, I think staying true to reality in a lot of ways and grounding these like kind of over the top, larger than life characters I draw, I think it's a good balance. It's like when I'm drawing these characters, I want you to immediately know who this character is or have a preconceived notion of who the character is by what they wear, what they look like. Do they have tattoos? Are they huge? Are they emaciated? Are they a certain age or whatever? And then by their dialogue, you either enforce that image or you show something maybe that's very different from your initial idea from what you're getting from visuals.
Right. So.
Hey Lewis, I want to give a heads up. We've got 2 live shout outs
Okay.
today from Indiana Flores,
Indiana Flores.
CLS Smith. So
Oh, that's my mom, dude. Hi, Mom. I love you. And you'll be here next week. So
There we go.
you can embarrass me all you want when you're here.
So I wanted to talk about how we ended up meeting. You've been doing all this. Oh, that's right. You ended up getting into manga, and you ended up working at a karaoke bar.
That's correct.
And that's where you learned Japanese, right?
Yes. Well, after showing my portfolio at San Diego Comic-Con and just showing my work, I knew right after going into a Japanese bookstore, I think it was Kinokuniya or Asahiya, I saw manga books. And I flipped through them, and my whole thing was I loved drawing ever since I could remember picking up a crayon. But story-wise, most of the stories I read, I wasn't interested in, and I never thought I could come up with stories about like, alien races and government conspiracies and like, just...
Which is what American comics all are, right? Yeah.
And superheroes in general were not my thing. But I just thought, okay, well, I guess I'll draw because I can't come up with those stories. When I walked into this bookstore and I looked at manga and everything, none of the characters had costumes or superpowers. They're just regular people wearing suits or just regular clothes and drinking tea and talking and just walking around real places.
Right. Because despite the manga that comes over here, which is kind of more like Sailor Moon and all that kind of stuff, manga has a very strong tradition in Japan on telling these very human stories.
And that's why the readership is so much more expensive.
Right. It's not just
it's
teenagers
not niche,
and
So genre-wise, there is no specific particular genre that makes manga. So you could do, they have historical ones, cooking, martial arts, adventure, mystery. They have everything. Horror. They've got erotic stuff. Like they just have everything. So there is a kind of comic book that anybody can potentially be into, and that's why you have such a larger readership in Japan. It's the largest industry for comics. The States, after certain things like the comic book code and whatever, it became very niche in terms of like what you can offer, and it was just superheroes. And so not everybody's into superheroes.
Yeah.
And even right now, people will go and watch the movies, but in terms of reading the books, I'll watch it in live action while I eat popcorn and just kind of, spend like 2 hours of my life. Now, going to a comic book store and reading a book, maybe I don't want to do that. In Japan, you can find a character that's basically any point of your life, there's a character who has a story about things you might have gone through or what you might go through, which always makes things interesting. And most of them are based and grounded in real life and Japanese culture.
Right.
So instantly people have an affinity for certain characters, or they understand what's going on, or the most important thing, and if you can do this in a story, is show something that the reader has felt themselves at some point, and like you got them. That's a very important thing. I remember seeing these comics and seeing characters, like teenage guys running around wearing like actual clothes, like Adidas shoes,
Right.
and like like a slugger, a Louisville slugger, a baseball bat, and they're like eating cup ramen or whatever. And I thought, well, this is just all real stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd never been to Tokyo at the time, but I could tell that was real Tokyo just by the way everything was depicted and the level of detail of things, the slice of life element to it. And I knew exactly that that's what I wanted to do, but for a Western market, and specifically the city of Los Angeles.
So that is a great segue. That means that basically you contacted Tokyo Pop through this contest we were having called the Rising Stars of Manga, right? And I love the entry. And that's what Mark Benicia actually contacted you, who later went to Marvel and then contacted you about Ghost Rider. So Mark,
11
how you
years
doing?
later.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but your submission was great because the story was about a 15-page story about a struggling artist in LA who'd been promised by a publisher to publish his book. And he basically, the whole story is him riding his bike to the publishing office so that he could shoot his editor to death.
Right.
And then I looked at that thing and I was like, I would have been the editor for this guy. Like putting my life on the line, right? So that piece then, because we could talk for a long time about that and everything else, but I want to get to MBQ. So out of that piece came MBQ here. Yeah, there we go. So talk a little bit about how you came to creating MBQ and creating Mario, because he's very much like you.
Yeah.
He's a struggling artist in LA. He rides his bike everywhere.
He's $25,000 in debt to his fine
There
art
we
school.
go.
His roommate is Jeff, who's my roommate. Still my roommate now. Jeff and his brother Roy. Thank you guys. You guys are the best. He went to school with me in Chicago. Yeah, actually, I also want to I want to thank Mark Panicia for, he had a conversation with me. He said, we want to offer you a 3-book deal. And he said, it's important, and I'm glad he said this. He said, don't pitch us your baby. Don't pitch us something that you can't part with, that it has to be yours. And so quickly, Felipe became Omario.
Right.
And the characters, 5 out of the 6 main characters are real people. But I changed their names a little bit so that the publisher would not own their likeness and their names.
Right.
And
yeah.
Omario, was like a kind of like a proxy for me.
And this is your first piece. I mean,
And
it's like
it's my first.
It's
series
like if
ever.
your first piece is also your baby, well, then you're gonna live a
Yeah.
typical life. Though the book is amazing. I love.
Well, the hard thing is, like, it's or at least for me it is. I think in a way it's hard for me to be a professional, quote unquote, creator, because it's hard for me to detach myself from projects. So I mean, it still is my baby.
Right.
It's just I don't own it, which we'll talk about that later with my
Right.
Kickstarter. But like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
something that I hold very dearly. It's a very important part of my life and of my career as an artist. And just generally just like learning to do comic books, but it is not mine. But contractually, I do not own the intellectual property. And he did give me a heads up, which I'm very grateful for, because I could have,
Right.
even though I did fall in love with it while doing it, the idea was that it wasn't gonna be
Right.
like my baby the way I had it planned. But I guess everything you make, after a while, if you really put a lot of effort into
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
it does become your baby. So I got a couple babies.
That's good. And also, I learned a very good lesson about editing with you, and that is the best approach to editing is to kind of stay out of your way. You're kind of like a bullet train. I loved it.
But also that's the other thing. Like I was very lucky to have you as an editor, because you understand. I tell people this at San Diego Comic-Con this year. Like, people were asking me about that. I was on a panel for Boom Studios about it was called "How to Make It into the Comic Book Industry and How to Stay In." How to break it and how to stay in. And the one thing I said was, I used to think I don't need an editor, because an editor is just going to be a force that stops me from doing what I want to do and isn't going to understand what I want. And a good editor understands exactly what it is that you want to do and might not want to do the same himself, but it's in his best interest to help you achieve what it is that you want to do in the best way possible. And that's exactly what you do. Because if I was a train going forward, maybe I was derailing it, and so you would like kind of put something
Nudge you
for me
back
to kind of
in,
bump
right,
me back
yeah.
in. And you would do that. Like, there'd be a scene where, I was really angry. It was like, this was my time to be heard.
Right.
So I was like, no cursing in your video podcast, right? All right,
David, I don't know, cursing?
All right, no. So I was like, screw your idea of what comic books are. Like, I know what comic books are. They're just a form of expression, and and you can write whatever you want, and this and that and whatever. And so, like, I remember you looking at it, and it was very charged and like passionate and like kind of like aggressive. And just sat there and like you totally got it. I mean, you're an artist yourself and you're a musician, which I thought, I was super happy to hear that when I met you. I was like, all right, cool. Like, this dude knows about like self-expression and creativity. He's not just a suit, But
I mean, actually, I think I was wearing this.
yeah, totally. And but you were like, okay, well, no, I totally get it. And then you were like, well, you know what? How about instead of using this word, we use this word, which doesn't alienate any of your readers. Well, this word could. And then instead of saying it this way.
This was a particular sequence in which you're railing on the American comic book industry.
Yeah. And there were very small changes. The message was exactly 100% the same, but I wasn't rubbing anybody the wrong way.
Right.
You found a way to help me get them on my side with my straw.
Right, because it's not that everybody doesn't have these same frustrations and concerns about things, right? But yeah, that's right. Words were particularly charged.
Exactly.
But let's get, because I want to, we're talking a lot, which is great.
Yeah.
I would love to have a part 2 sometime. But I want to get to, so MBQ comes out. You get a lot of attention for it, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot. I think it was one of our more popular
At least
original
review-wise,
manga
I guess,
books, right? And so the idea is he became a manga artist, right?
Right.
But because manga artists are Japanese, that didn't sit well, right? Though you had been studying manga, you studied Japanese, you learned the language, right?
Yeah.
And you showed me this video, and I want to show a clip of it, of you talking to a comic book store owner in Argentina, right? So let's show that clip real quick, and then we can talk about where the genesis of this comes from.
Let's do it.
Hey, how's everybody doing? This is Felipe Smith. I'm the author and illustrator of MBQ, the best manga nobody's ever heard.
Pero yo creo que tú deberías despegar del formato manga.
Como no sé japonés, no puedo dibujar manga.
No.
オレンステインさんは、俺が日本人ではないから漫画を描けないって言ってるけど、俺はそんなことないと思います。どうやればいい？俺はとりあえず漫画を
Not make manga because you're not Japanese, and then you speak Japanese straight into the camera.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was I wanted to document that, so I went with my sister and my cousin in Argentina when I was visiting my parents to this comic book store. The guy Eduardo Orenstein is very knowledgeable on comics, bandezine, manga, everything. Like he's interviewed a lot of great, huge creators all over the world, and he had a TV show about the comic book medium. And his whole thing was that format and that the tankobon black and white, like 200 plus page like books. People who wanted manga that was authentic and made by a Japanese creator. And so my whole thing was like, it doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, what your gender is or whatever. Like if you have the tools to do it and you're able to express yourself through that medium, that's it.
Right.
But his opinion wasn't just him alone. It was just basically everybody. Everybody was like, who's this Felipe Smith guy? Thinks he's doing manga and whatever. And I knew they were absolutely wrong. Like completely like. So
well, the other, I even got notes kind of from some of the higher ups at Tokyo Pop to ask you to sort of move things more into a manga-looking sort of place, like get bigger eyes.
And that's a misconception that that the manga look and style was something that was like very pushed to make manga stand out from comic books and be something different, to not suffer the same stigma that comics had at the time. But there is no real style for manga. The only style maybe is that it's in black and white and it's large format compared to like monthly comic books in the States. But there are a lot of drawing styles. Some of them look like indie comics here, like Dan Clausen. I mean, there's all sorts of styles. It's not just like what was being pushed at the time, which was like Gundam, Pokemon,
Sailor Moon,
Furikuri, Sailor Moon, all that kind of very kind of anime styled manga comic books, But there's all sorts of styles. So I knew that from looking at hundreds of books, and that's what gave me a feeling that I could do my own thing with my own style as well, and that it would work.
Yeah,
and that's why I worked at the karaoke bar, because I was like, if people didn't want to publish my work, then I'm going to have to learn another language to try to go to a market where I felt maybe I'd have a chance to do it. Which sounds like a crazy idea to like just out of 23 years old, you're like, I'm going to learn a new language just to do comics, and which the boss at the karaoke bar, Hideki-san, thanks for the chance you gave me. もう本当にお世話になりました. Japanese karaoke bar owner. And everybody, his whole crew, they were all Japanese. But this American guy who's a college graduate, he was like, if you're a college graduate, why do you want to work at this karaoke bar for minimum wage? And I told him, listen, I'm a comic book artist. Nobody wants to publish me in the States. And like, I need to learn Japanese. Because if I can learn Japanese, then maybe I have a chance of publishing the kind of stories I want in a market that has a lot more variety. And at the time, I didn't want to write for kids. My whole thing was I wanted to write for a mature audience. And by mature, I don't mean pornography or anything like that. It's just that, certain storylines that a kid wouldn't care about. Like, what I was struggling with, making rent, just like, making sense out of having spent 4 years and a whole bunch of money in a fine art school to then like just be working at a Chinese restaurant, but actually like getting a chance to make art for a living. and all sorts of other stuff, love and all these things.
Okay, so at that point, you do what a lot of people never thought was possible, and there was somebody who did actually end up going to Japan that wasn't white, Paul Pope, right, or something like that. Yeah, but he actually didn't end up getting an actual series, right?
He went to Kodansha, the same publisher.
Right,
10
right.
years later, got me. Well, there's different stories.
we don't
I've
have
read
to.
interviews and it said that he hadn't gotten published. When I went over there, I asked about it, and they had artists from everywhere, Europe, Latin America,
right,
everything.
yeah, totally.
And they said that they published everybody's work, and it just didn't perform very well. People weren't into it. Their work schedule-wise, like these artists were taking longer than Japanese artists, and so eventually it was a failed attempt to do something different.
So what was different with you? Because so the end of the story here is that you go to Japan and Kodansha gives you a series.
Yeah, it's correct. Yeah,
It's Pipichu right here,
Pipichu,
and
yeah.
it's about a kid from Chicago,
from Southside Chicago.
yeah,
Milton.
who ends up going to Japan thinking Japan's going to be this fantastic, wonderful, just paradise place
For the otaku.
because he only understands Japan through anime and manga,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly,
And he
yeah.
gets there and is confronted with the bitter realities of what
That Japan is just
urban
another
Tokyo
country.
life.
So yeah, I received around the time I was doing the video. I did the video in Argentina, and everybody was saying, "You're not Japanese. You can't do this. Who do you think you are? You don't know what manga is." I received an email from someone I did not know, who said they were an agent in Japan, and that they would like to represent me and show my work to publishers in Japan and publish me over there. I thought it was a joke and somebody was just messing with me, but I decided to answer politely and say that I was interested because I was. It turned out that Shina Yukari, who later became my literary agent in Japan, was not joking and she wasn't kidding, and she had already shown MBQ to the editor-in-chief of Kodansha, which he liked. Luckily at that time I'd been working at the karaoke bar for 3 years, and I had learned to read, write, and speak enough to articulate my ideas and what I wanted to do. And so I met with the editor-in-chief at San Diego Comic-Con in 2007, and I told him, and he said, well, if you were to write for a Japanese audience, what kind of story would you write? And I told him, I'm not particularly interested in writing for a Japanese audience. To which he kind of answered with a very stern look, like, what are you talking about? And I told him, I want to write for a global audience, which is still something I want to do. I want something that somebody Japanese, Argentine, Jamaican, American, whoever they may be, can take something from the story and identify with its characters. And he liked that answer. He was like,
Yeah.
Like, all right, that's a good answer. So then, then I pitched him a story about an otaku it's basically a story of cultural misconceptions between Japan and the U.S. So there's this kid from Southside Chicago who loves this anime called Pipochu. He cosplays like Pipochu, and he can't cosplay in his neighborhood because he'll get his ass beat. But he feels like if he were born in Japan, everybody would understand him, and he would get along with everybody because everybody in Japan loves anime and manga and video games,
Right, yeah.
and cosplays. Wrong. Then there's Morimoto Rockstar, who's a Yakuza character, a young Yakuza who loves American culture. And to him, America is Scarface, BET,
Yeah.
MTV videos.
Guns, cowboys' hats.
And tattoos. And so, he's trying to do drive-bys in Tokyo and doing all these things where the Yakuza is very traditional. They're not flashy. He wears leopard print leather pants that are like lime green, and cowboy hats and feather boas, and he nickel-plated Glocks, and he's completely ridiculous. But he thinks he wants to be American.
So
he's
two
doing all these
characters that misunderstand each other's
Exactly.
culture.
Yeah. And yet very, one of them's an otaku nerd, and the other
All right.
one is like a very deadly Yakuza.
Well, let's get a little look. You were on a Japanese TV show, it seems, or
it was there's two comedians, Oriraji, and they love comic books, so they had this show where they basically had people pitch comic book series, and then they would judge whether or not the audience should buy all volumes of the series or start with the first one. So you have 5 minutes to pitch your series.
Okay, so let's take a look at Felipe on this show.
この方ですどうぞ
一番家に置いてある一番ローテクノロジーなものはトイレですよ。
面白い
だからトイレにすごいいっぱいボタンをつけてあると、ちょっとこんな感じしか見えないな、俺らに。
I love the clip we chose. It was the clip in which you show the Japanese toilet.
Yeah.
Because I know we're running out of time here, and I really want to get to your current project and talk a little bit about the digital space before we close out. So, long story short, you spent time in Japan. You pitched 5 more projects to them. None of them were picked up. They said yes to the last project.
Yes.
And that's when you decided just to leave. You didn't give them the project they said yes to after pitching for 2 years or 4 years. Yeah,
2 years. Pitched for 2 years.
that's right. Pitched for 2 years. You were there for 4 years.
Yeah.
So you come back to LA. I'm just going to give them the bullet points so we can jump right into your current project. You get the job at the Turtles. You do the ghostwriter thing, which we talked about a little bit earlier. And now Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is over. Ghostwriter
Over for me.
over
right
for
now,
you
okay,
right
yeah.
now. Okay. So now Felipe Smith is now a completely. I mean, now you have over 10 years now or 15 years now since we started talking about kind of your career. You've done so many things. You've become the only kind of non-Japanese mangaka.
I got the first Western artist to create a serialized manga for the largest publisher in Japan for over a year.
There we go. Be very specific.
very specific,
Good, because everybody has to Google that to make sure that particular
Those are the
thing is
facts.
correct. So now you want to do your own project.
Yes.
You were talking about MBQ and the problems there, not owning your own work. You've talked about really liking working on Ghostwriter and Teenage Ninja Turtles, but those aren't your characters and it's not kind of your world. But now you are going to use Kickstarter, and this is where the digital stuff comes in. You're going to use Kickstarter to really launch a new book now with all this stuff at your sale, at your back, right?
Yes. Yes.
Can you tell us what the series is real quick, and then we'll take a real quick look at a video for it.
All right. The series was actually, it was a series that my publisher was interested in Japan, but I figured it would actually work a lot better for a Western audience for a lot of different reasons. The series is called Death Metal Zombie Cop. It takes place in LA. The title might sound ridiculous. There is no other way to name the series. It's very specific. Every word in that title specifically relates to the story, okay? This isn't buzzword salad, as I saw in a comment on the internet. It absolutely is not. I just want people to read it because when they actually realize, there's a moment of realization where you see that it's not just an outrageous title, but you're like, oh no, that's why it's called Death Metal Zombie Cop. I get it, I'm in. And that's like, I want people to get to that moment. But because I want to own it as a creator and I don't want to give up any rights to it, I want to have full control over what happens with the series and its characters, I decided to go through Kickstarter and do crowdfunding so that hopefully people who do like my work, whether they started with MBQ people who are all new Ghostwriter or still haven't heard from me or about me right now, which could be right now people watching the show, you can help me make this a reality by pledging. You'll get digital downloads, print out like a printed copy, signed, t-shirts, buttons, posters, all sorts of stuff. But basically, besides those goodies you'll get, which are pretty good quality, I'm working with my sister. She's like a genius designer. Just graduated from her class. #1 project of her graduating class in design. So Mariela, you killed it. You're the best. And now you work for me.
Well, real quick, tell us before we lead into this, tell us kind of the general idea of the main two characters.
Okay, so it takes place in LA. It's a slice of life story with like real, legitimate LAPD protocol. And it's these 2 police officers. One of them is a training officer. She's a genius police officer, 3-year training officer. She's only 23 years of age.
But she's getting out.
She starts with the story starts. She gave her 2 weeks notice. Then we have this rookie who's like very promising rookie. He's like the golden boy of law enforcement in LA. He has no experience on the streets, but like book-wise, he knows everything, and he's very good at shooting and everything, driving, everything you have to do as a cop. But he's a rookie who's 40 years old, so he's been doing something before this. Nobody becomes a rookie at 40, so something's up. Neither of them want to talk about why they're quitting or why they're 40 when they're just starting this job, which is a very extreme job to be an LAPD officer. There's drug cartel and there is, street gang.
I feel like it wouldn't be a Felipe Smith book without all that.
Yeah, I guess. But it is a very realistic kind of depiction of the activities of the drug cartels in Mexico and Southern California. I've read up on LAPD procedure. The idea is that it's based on a true story, is what it says. Death Metal Zombie Cop, believe it or not, is based on a true story. And all the locations and stuff are, they're real. But there is a supernatural element, which is this character, LA's Nightmare, who drives around in a very weird patrol car, a lightning-powered patrol car, and he is devouring the hell out of crime in LA.
All right, so let's take a real quick look at what this book looks like. And of course, I feel in this little clip, we'll also feel your enthusiasm reach out through the screen. So let's take a look at.
His first day on the job, her last 2 weeks. 2 cops, 1 beat, 0 else in common. I get it. Your typical buddy cop story, right? Officers Riley and Miranda soon find out that a corruption-plagued justice system and the tightening stranglehold of the drug cartel are just the tip of the iceberg when LA's deadliest urban legend reveals itself to be very...
So where can people find the Kickstarter?
Oh man, just go to the Kickstarter page and look up Death Metal Zombie Cop. If you can remember that title, you'll find it. We didn't get any of the gore in that video, man.
Oh,
it's crazy.
that's
It's
right,
like
yes.
ultra violent, but you'll see the video. It's video's about 1:50. It explains a little bit more in depth who Rhonda Riley, the training officer, and Marco Miranda, the rookie, are. And then we see this LA's nightmare, undead crime fighter, absolutely obliterating all opposition. It is not for kids. There's violence. It's pretty graphic. I try to do violence in a beautiful manner. So I mean, drawing wise, I think it looks cool, looks nice. I don't glorify violence, but this is somebody who feeds on people, so it's not going to be a pretty picture. Please check it out. Go to Kickstarter, Death Metal Zombie Cop, project by Felipe Smith, and yeah, I mean, pledge. I've got the first pledge is $1. It says, "I like your work, but I'm broke." A couple people did that one. Even if you could do that one, $1 does help me get closer to my goal. We're already past the 60% mark right now, and I have 21 days left. So it might seem like I have a lot. I usually have 30 days. It's not. Like, time flies. So, if it's not your thing, but you have a friend who's a maniac who you think would like this, let them know about Death Metal Zombie Cop. Send them an email. Let them know. I need people to know. I need people to read.
So that gets into kind of what this show is about now. This is about working in the digital space and what the digital space allows artists to do that they couldn't do otherwise, right? So now, again, we've seen you have a whole career. You've worked hard. You've had many, many nights, especially working for me, where I know you stayed up like 20 hours to finish pages. And so I feel like this is something different. This is something that empowers you, and it couldn't really happen without the digital space. And you mentioned digital downloads too. The idea is that not everybody could go into a store and get a book or want to.
Right.
They could download digital. Comics still have a power even in a digital format, right? And that's something that you were
it's immediate. It's also the cheapest pledge, by the way. So if you just want the digital copy with like wallpapers and stuff, $10. Do that. But yeah, I mean, it's immediate. A lot of people go through Comixology for comics, and they just get the comic right away. Some of them get it like before Wednesday, Wednesday morning before going to work or going to school or whatever. They read all their comics. They don't even need to go to the comic book shop. Potentially, you can reach way more of an audience in the digital realm because you could be anywhere. You could be in like Abu Dhabi. You could be in wherever. You just download, boom,
right,
you got it. You can read it. It's content that's at your at your disposal, like right away. It also doesn't kill trees, which is great. Yeah, I mean, it's to me.
There's something beautiful about books too.
No, I love books as well, but it's a thing. Those people want to keep things.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're talking about this too. Before we even started this broadcast, we were catching up, and you were talking about how you want to sort of get a little bit more into After Effects and get a little bit more into all this other. You're really looking at video as a strong way to interface with your audience, even though your material is drawn.
Definitely.
The digital world is where you're marketing it, where you're distributing it. Talk a little bit about how that is empowering you to do what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, especially social media it's been a way, and I mean, for artists, it's just a way to get to your audience. There's no middleman. It's just kind of, once they find you, that's it. You can talk to them. Right before doing this thing, I got on, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, and just kind of told people, hey, I'm going to be at Butcher Bird Studios, doing a live thing. And then, yeah, like right away, people were retweeting. Then, like, my mom is like sending messages and stuff. Like, the digital realm is definitely a very quick, immediate way to like. By the way, my mom's in Argentina. Like, I didn't call her. I didn't, and just like somebody from Argentina could like at the, drop of a hat, because I pretty much gave a heads up 25 minutes before this happened. Right. And that's how immediate it is, So like comic books, it's the same thing, Like maybe it takes you a while to put them together, but then once it's done, boom, people can get it immediately. There's no shipping time, none of that, no production, no printing time, and that's basically, you know, video. These are all things that, again, they're very immediate. You can get them out there. You can get them to potentially like a huge audience.
And you were even talking about the stuff that people like, or the process ones too. You were talking about doing time-lapse drawings of your stuff, and people really eating that up. And I mean, you're creating an ecosystem around Felipe Smith in this book.
Right. Yeah. By the way, I'm going to be doing a couple more time-lapse drawings. I did one of All New Ghost Rider. I was at Gabriel Luna, the guy who plays Robbie Reyes on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I was at his house. He set up a little camera, and like we both drew, and I did a Ghost Rider. But I'll be doing more for Death Metal Zombie Cop. I'll also be doing like a little short Q&A or whatever. People can like comment and ask stuff. You asked something and I totally like moved it completely.
That's all right. I was talking about how the digital space allows you, I mean, like how does that change kind of even how you're approaching all this stuff? I kind of feel in a way, this was your approach 15 years ago or 11 years ago, right?
Like is the
yeah.
days, yeah.
I mean, but also like you would go to people. I mean, everybody you saw on the street, you would show them MBQ, right? You would say, "Listen, do you read comic books?" They would say no.
Like, no.
And you go, I'm going to show you the first page." Like if they responded to that, you had them, right? You were like, "I'm going to buy this book. I've never bought a comic in my life. I'm going to buy this one."
Yeah, I feel like all our first pages were like that.
Yeah,
we had that
I
like
think so.
goblin monster with like the mosaic genitals, and like and then we had like the stripper with like the crazy face, dude.
Yeah, totally.
All right, this is the genital. No, this is the stripper. I don't know if you can see this.
Show this one right here.
This camera right here. If you can zoom in, I don't know if you can zoom in, but she's got like a wild looking face. I'm gonna walk up to the camera real quick. I hope the light works. There you go. Like, she looks like Apex Twin, like window licker or something. She's got like a killer body, but her face is insane. If you look like her, your face is not insane. You're very pretty, by the way. So don't.
I also love the picture in here with your full beard and everything.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot that
Very
existed.
insurgent look I had going on.
We're getting near the end there. I'd love to be able to close this out. Like I said, I feel like we could talk for so much longer because we didn't even get into the stuff. Like when we get together, like we can kind of go for like 2 hours just talking about art and the way art works and commercial audiences versus art audiences and where the intersection happens and what it means. And I feel like I would love to do that sometimes. So maybe if the show takes off, you and I could get together. We can only talk about that the whole time.
You got me.
Or only talk about Ghost Rider or only talk about MBQ, because actually the story of making MBQ itself is so interesting and so fun. I mean, at one point, I think one of the executives at Tokyo Pop were telling me, kill that name. Don't let him call it MBQ. You got to kill that name.
Yeah. Well, it's because it was McBurger Queen first.
Yes.
They're like, no. Still think it was great. McBurger Queen is great, but you found a way to make it.
There's
MBQ,
something about MBQ that's so quick. Anyway, so I think we're gonna have to cut it.
Okay. All right.
But everybody, thank you so much, Felipe, for being here. I want to thank everybody for watching. I would keep watching this series. Again, Butcher Bird Presents. It's all about people, artists, creators, managers, producers, all working in the digital space in all sorts of different ways. And I feel like you embody that right now. So thank you so much.
Right,
and then also check out Kickstarter, Death Metal Zombie Cop. All right, we'll see you guys later. Thank you so much.
Thank you.